Hello everyone, Waldos is here with something a bit different for you today. So yesterday saw the Steam release of Darkest Dungeon 2, which has been on my watch list for quite a while, as are a few games that are coming out this week, including things like Void Train, as well as things like Street Fighter 6 coming out next month. So I thought I'd do a first impressions video for those of you who may be interested in Darkest Dungeon 2, but may be on the fence about purchasing it. As always, if you do enjoy the video and find it helpful, then please make sure to like, comment and subscribe, as it really helps me out in growing this channel, so that I can bring you even more content. So the TLDR is that the game is absolutely fantastic, but it is significantly different to its predecessor, and you need to go into it expecting a bit of a different experience, or you may find yourself a little bit disappointed. So let's get into some of the detail and break it all down, starting with the most obviously standout part of this game, its aesthetics and graphics. So if you can't tell from my avatar, I'm a big fan of demons, vampires, dark aesthetics, and I'm generally just a huge horror nerd. And the Darkest Dungeon series has always been one of the best in the genre when it comes to aesthetics, with the second game elevating that amazing style one step further, with the introduction of 3D elements and more detailed and frankly amazing looking animations. The game looks fantastic in every sense of the word, from its decrepit towers to the shambling hordes of darkness. Every aspect of the game just breathes gothic Lovecraftian horror. If you're a fan of the first game's look and feel, well, Darkest Dungeon 2 escalates that to a new high, and you'll absolutely love it. In particular, combat looks better than ever, with 3D models replacing the more static 2D art style, but retaining the same stylization through the application of some crafty shaders, textures and lighting. Overall, Red Hook have absolutely outdone themselves once again by steeping every element of the game in that signature dread-filled style. However, I'll be interested to see how the new 3D motion impacts the modding scene going forward, as the mod scene for Darkest Dungeon 1 was particularly large, especially with the creation of new characters, and I do have a concern as to whether this new style will reduce modders' ability to create new characters due to having to have more enhanced skills to create the 3D animations and 3D models. Okay, so now it's time to talk about the most important part of the game, the gameplay. Now, if you're coming into this game from the original and are expecting more of the same, you might find yourself a little bit disappointed, as the Hamlet is gone, and as are the days of managing a multitude of heroes over a 50-60 hour campaign, where you had to manage your resources carefully to keep your heroes alive and de-stressed, or lose your progress due to an unfortunate hero death. This means that one of the key areas from Darkest Dungeon 1, getting attached to the character and feeling the weight of losing them, is actually no longer a thing, as your hero's journey starts and ends with each individual run, which can be a bit of a put-off for people who are fans of the original game. Instead, the game is taking a more traditional run-based approach, similar to games like Monster Train and Slay the Spire, where you guide your gothic stagecoach through various environments, choosing which path to take and tackling the various problems you find along the road. At the start of each new run, you choose your heroes, and they start completely anew, just keeping bonuses that you buy between runs, with the game's main currency, Candles of Hope, which allow you to buy items, upgrades and unlocks that persist between runs. This gives quite a different feel to the original, but for players like myself who work full time and have less time to invest per play session, it actually feels a lot better, as a dead hero doesn't mean that I've lost a lot of time and now need to invest a load more hours in training a replacement. Every run feels like you're making progress. This lowers the game's barrier to entry, but it might put off those of you who loved the more long-term Hamlet management system. One other key difference which is unique to the second game and comes as a result of the gameplay style change is the managing of relationships between your characters. During your journey, characters will slowly learn to like or dislike each other. This results in various different interactions, boons and debuffs. For example, your Hellion might decide that they hate your Vestal. This will cause you to get blessed or cursed skills, which cause additional effects, either negative or positive. This also impacts how they approach situations in the conversational encounters, with new dialogue trees and options. For example, you may find an encounter that would normally be able to be talked your way out of, now can't be avoided due to the party bickering. This is a really interesting mechanic, and it really makes the heroes feel like they have a bit more personality. It also can be an absolute killer on some runs, because maintaining a good relationship is the key to success. Otherwise, you can end up with scenarios like I had on a recent run, where everybody hated my healer, and every time I used my heal, the The party's Hellion, who was my main damage dealer, suffered stress, which eventually led to her having a meltdown and dying. This made encounters considerably harder, as I had to be much more specific about when I use that heal to avoid that stress buildup. Now, as your journey progresses, tons of small sub-mechanics slowly get added in, which begin to ramp up the intensity of that journey. Hit too many bumps in the road and your stagecoach might need a repair, triggering an emergency encounter where you're essentially missing one of your party as they repair the carriage. Build up the loathing resource and see yourself assailed by debuffs as the mountain wakes, releasing its horrors. Maybe you'll encounter a den packed full of creatures that attack in waves, creating chains of battles, or even encounter a familiar face on the side of the road, lugging around remnants of a certain squalid hamlet. Now, combat remains pretty much the same as it was in Darkest Dungeon 1, although new icons, the inspect mode and fantastic new animations make it feel just a whole step forward in terms of the look and feel. However, skill descriptions still aren't that great in terms of passing over the information, so this is something that they could still improve with some clearer notation. Now, there is obviously much more that I could go into on the gameplay, such as mini-boss layers, stagecoach upgrades and hero subclasses, but I'll save those for some upcoming videos and streams, as I'd love to dig into them a bit more before I give some more detailed information on them, and this is more of a first impressions video. Overall, however, the gameplay feels great, and if you're a fan of the first game, there is a lot to like here, despite there being a couple of changes that you may or may not 100% agree with. Now, when it comes to the story of Darkest Dungeon 2, I actually found the presentation of it better than the original. The story takes place in segments that happen leading into each run, in this cool walkthrough art book style, which looks absolutely fantastic. And because of the travel time through it as you're moving forward with the carriage, it makes you take the time to take it in as you progress, which I feel presents it a lot better than Darkest Dungeon 1 did. However, the story doesn't feel quite as good as the original game. You will also along the way come across certain locations called hero shrines that will let you pick one of your heroes and experience chapters of that particular character's history. Complete this history and you will unlock a special ability which gives you a good encouragement to seek out the shrines and progress that story. And a big shout out to Red Hook as always on the sound design for this too, as once again it is absolutely on point with the narrator absolutely nailing the gothic charm of the original and presenting these story elements in a really gripping way. So what's the final verdict? Well, so far I am really enjoying this game. It really feels fresh and in a lot of ways a sidestep to the original game rather than a straight update to a new version like you see with many sequels, taking what was great about the original and making something new and engaging around it. There is a lot to love and the shorter run format really fits my personal playstyle a lot better than the original. However, I do think, as mentioned before, that some of the differences may put off some of the fans of the original, especially those who are a big fan of the long-term party management elements. Overall though, I would say that if you enjoy the original, or Dark Gothic games in general, then picking up Darkest Dungeon 2 is a no-brainer, but just make sure that you go into it with the expectation that this is more than just a fresh coat of paint on the first game, but a totally different gameplay style that captures what was great about the original and presents it in a new and interesting way, and for me that is what a great sequel is all about. I'd say based on these first impressions, I'd give the game an 8 out of 10. The game feels and plays fantastic, it's familiar yet different, and whilst it will definitely alienate some of the original player base, I think the vast majority of players will love what is definitely a good addition to the Darkest Dungeon series. And that is all for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. I know this has been a bit different to my usual content, with it being obviously not Meet Your Maker, but I will be doing some more Darkest Dungeon 2 content and this seemed like a great way to introduce it. So until the next video, remain safe on the road, and remember that overconfidence is a slow and insidious killer.